opened All American Jeans is 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 remarkable.
Yeah.
And so many people in town have no idea about that story.
Well,
Anyhow, this morning I sent you some photographs.
thank you.
Tom Garner, myself, and David had lunch a few years. Tom and I share a birthday.
Oh, that's nice.
He's,
Talking to him on Monday.
I know, I believe he's 5 years older than me. And we went over to Mr. John's Steakhouse where Paul Varisco is a principal.
I got to talk to Paul.
And so I've got a photograph of all four of us
Yeah. Oh, that's
at
great.
Mr.
I'm so
John's.
glad you shared that.
And if you look at one of the photos, the there's a big black and white photograph behind us, which I think is the store.
Yeah,
You know.
that's really nice.
So anyhow,
Well, we genuinely should talk after this. Like,
Yeah.
I want to make sure I get your story, and I've got Sydney Torres is coming at 11:30, and so I just want to be sure that I get your story. But right now, what I'm doing is oral histories.
excellent.
I'm doing it as part of, it's a combination, it's a combined project of the library in Charlotte plus the local HBCU, and
I'm trying to learn more
yeah, so we should talk about that.
because mine end up, because I was an attorney, well, still am, it sound more like depositions than
Right.
oral histories.
I get
And
that.
I bought a few books, and I bought them. I just haven't read them, and I'd like to get it. If you can give me some pointers on
Yeah,
it,
I would love to share some
Because-
of our materials, because what I wanted, we worked to make the oral history, we got 338 stories so far in a year and a half, which I'm incredibly proud of. And in part, we got them by decentralizing the collection process, which means making everything, using the most easy to use equipment, and training a bunch of people, including some college students, on how to do this. So we've got a lot of materials, and I would love to talk with you. And
Oh,
then the other thing I wanted to
yeah.
mention is, I haven't talked about this with my dad or Kenny or anybody, so, you know,
I won't
until
say.
until I
Yeah.
find the way to present it. I would love to I would love to collect all of these interviews into a collection about Rubensteins and donate it to a historical collection or an oral history or something, so that it lives forever, you know, because we're
It's
not going to use
got
it all
to.
for stuff, yeah.
No,
Good stuff in here.
there are so many. There are stories that, because I talked to Tom for a few minutes this morning, and I said, Tom, those guys, X, Y, and Z. He goes, oh yeah, that was when they were trying to run book out of blah, blah, blah. I go, yeah, that's what I remember. I said, I'm not telling that story. I'm going, we're going on the high end and all that. But it was it was such an education. I started working Christmas.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Let's dive in. But before we start, will you tell me who you are, why you're here, all that good stuff? So
This is the intro question
we
for
might as
your.
well start. Exactly, 'cause I can tell we're gonna get into it, which is good.
My name is Roland Belsome. Currently, I'm a Court of Appeal judge in New Orleans. I'm a former trial judge, trial attorney, but I believe I'm here because I started my formal education at Rubenstein Brothers Christmas break 1976, my freshman year of college. I had been at University of Southwestern Louisiana, and I was broke. And I came home desperately looking for a job. My stepfather knew Elkin and Morris Rubenstein, and I was a New Orleans East guy, and I walked all throughout the plaza trying to find work, and I walked in Rubenstein Brothers, and it was so busy. There was so much activity, and I tried to talk to the manager, who was too busy to speak to me, and I said, God, I could work here. This would be great. And so I called my stepdad. I said, do you think maybe you could call and see if I could if they just talk to me, I know I could get the job, I could do the job. And that's my side. I understand he called Elkin, and my message was put on my best coat and tie and come down to the store. Now, recently, this was again December 1976. Recently, David, Mr. David, as we called him at the time, uh, shared with me how I got hired. And Mr. David said that his dad, Elkin, had come to him and said, "Oh, the judge's son, my stepfather was a judge, is going to come by um, the Plaza store, so he's looking for work." And David said, "Oh, I'll be happy to interview him." And Elkin told him, "Oh, no, no, no. He's already had the interview, the judge's son." I said, "Man, and see, I thought I got the job off of my personality." And so I immediately started there, and it was one of the best experiences. Uh, my memories of working there, I worked that Christmas and later came back and I transferred to the University of New Orleans and essentially became a part-time, full-time worker at Rubenstein Brothers while I was in undergrad. During my summers, I would work nights at Rubenstein Brothers, and then during the days, I was an apprentice crane operator, so I would work in oil refineries, chemical refineries, and the
Not much
like.
use for suits in that job.
No, no, but it was when I say it was really my formal education, it was the most wonderful education. You've got to realize what the 70s were like in New Orleans at that time. People forget the Lake Forest Plaza. I cannot remember how many hundreds of stores were located inside the plaza. But I believe in 1977, 78, the plaza accounted for 25% of all sales tax revenue in the city of New Orleans. So you can do the math on that and just get an idea, a glimpse at what was taking place in New Orleans East at that time. And of course, New Orleans East, that was the flagship store for Rubenstein Brothers was downtown. And I had walked into this store on several occasions, but I was a young man um, in high school, and to say I was unsophisticated is really an understatement. It was pretty unsophisticated when I started working in December of '76. But I was able to hustle, and we worked on commission and minimum wage, and it was wonderful. I would go in at 9 o'clock in the morning and work until 9 o'clock in the evening every day that I could. And it was great. And I would try to hustle and help with one sale and try to build the sale up for a customer. And one thing really sticks in my mind. And we called Mr. David and Mr. Andre at the time. I had sold a client, a customer I was trying to work through, and I sold him socks and underwear and shirts, and he asked me about suits. I said, "Sure, let's go take a look at the suits." Um, Unbeknownst to me, I had not been properly trained on selling suits. And David smiled and he goes, "What are you looking for?" I said, "Well, this gentleman needs a suit who thinks," and he goes, "Oh, yes, sir, right this way." And he took my customer and gave him to one of the more seasoned salespeople, and then turned to me under his breath. He said, "Don't you go into suits. You're not trained. You don't belong here yet." I said, "Okay, I was just working. I was trying to." And for some reason, I remembered that was the day of his anniversary. And I said, boy, I hope he's in a better mood to talk to his wife that night. I don't know if you want to use
Right,
that
no.
story or not, but
No, no, it's a good story
it was,
though.
but at that time, I didn't realize that being a salesman there was more than just saying, here, try this on.
Mhm. What did you come to understand about selling?
Over time, over time, um, you started to understand that there was a philosophy uh, at Rubenstein Brothers. It was a store, you know how they say uh, fashions can go out of style, but style never goes out of fashion? Rubenstein Brothers promoted style and quality goods and quality service. And that is what you really learned when you were working there. You learned to take care of the whole customer, to help them get into a look that not only they were comfortable with, but that made them look better. And over time, you could see it with the salespeople because when they would train us to be salespeople, they were also training us about quality, style, cut, fit. And I really wish they would have kept photographs of who we were when we first started and where we were at the end. Um, you you saw dramatic differences in every new employee that started there, and it was a great experience for that because it was where a young man could come in or a more mature person, and they had everything you needed for your wardrobe, um, whether it was socks, underwear, shoes, shirts, ties, overcoats, sweaters, and and you just knew how to help someone build what they needed. And it wasn't a matter of pushing to just make the sale, it was helping them develop their statement. Because it is true. You know, you hear the phrase when you're younger that um, you only have one opportunity to make a first impression. Um, and that's what I think we were doing. We were helping people build for their first impressions. Um, and I remember vividly, um, particularly on Saturdays, throughout the time that I worked, uh, which would have been from December of '76 roughly till shortly before I graduated. I graduated law school in May of '84, and I think I worked my last day officially in January of '84 at Rubenstein Brothers. Um, every Saturday, you would see Morris and Elkin come to the store. They would always come in through the front door and stand quietly and observe what was going on. I didn't know them very well. They would they were always nice and very soft spoken. But at that point in time, David and Andre had really taken the reins. And typically they were there every Saturday, um, as as were Andre's sons, Mark and Kenny. I don't think, and I joke with Kenny a great deal right now because he is now somewhat the general manager of the store. Um, I'm not sure Kenny and Mark were older than 9 years old, maybe 10, and they would come there and they would be folding sweaters or restocking, and they had their coats and ties on, and they would dive in. Or, um, and I didn't know these ladies real well. I believe it was Gertrude and Dora, and and I, our perception of age is vastly different now. I'm 65 now. They may have been in their 50s, but I would have thought that was ancient at the time. And you did not touch the ties if Gertrude and Dora told you not to touch the ties. They would organize them, they would show you how you presented it. And I can recall reading an article some years later about how Gertrude was the tie buyer for the store. And she developed a relationship with Ralph Lauren because he apparently worked in ties or whatever, and he always wanted to know what her impression was. Was this a thumbs up or a thumbs down? And I, I always thought that was remarkable that this store that's about to celebrate its 100th anniversary has not only been on the forefront of fashion, service, style in this community, but nationally. Uh, I think the story of how Xenia came to the United States and David telling that story is just unbelievable. Um,
I'm curious. So you're working at the store, and you're also working as an undergraduate and a graduate student. Um, did you did you were the two worlds completely separated, or did you wear your Livingston clothes in your civilian life, and did it engender comments?
um, the worlds weren't really separated. Of course, I didn't wear a coat and tie to school, but my casual clothes upgraded. Um, People would make comments. It was, and again, it was just a different time period. Although I was at the plaza, I can tell you everyone in the city passed through that store. Now, the downtown store had many more celebrities, many more. When they would have a big fight that would come to town or the Super Bowl, you would hear stories of this star, that star that came into the store. But the plaza, I'll give you for instance, I can recall one Saturday, I had been working there for a few years at this point, and I had my own sales book, and I was diligent about trying to develop my customers, and I had gone from working minimum wage and commission that I was a straight commission employee. And I vividly remember one Saturday where I sold a fellow an iron worker who I had worked with at Shell Oil one summer. He came in, remembered that I worked there. I sold him a suit. I sold Ron Fauché a suit, who was a state representative at the time. Um, I showed Dutch Morial, who was the mayor. He just kind of passed through, but I was able to talk to him for a few minutes. One of my former professors at UNO came in, one of the philosophy professors, and I showed him some clothes. And Harry Lee, who was not yet the sheriff of Jefferson Parish, came in looking for a leather coat. That was all in one Saturday. And it was a mosaic of the city of New Orleans. Um, Not only the customers that came through, but if you go out into this city, um, investment bankers, lawyers, judges, I think some engineers, all worked at Rubenstein Brothers. It was, it's amazing. Judge, juvenile judge Clint Smith worked downtown at Rubenstein Brothers. Um, the St. Bernard trial judge Eric Bopp worked in the plaza at the All American Jean Shop, which is Rubenstein Brothers. Um, Former criminal court judge Franz Ziblich was another All American Jeans guy. Rubenstein Brothers. Um, Pastor Glenn Allen worked downtown at Rubenstein Brothers. So many people pass through these doors. Tom Garner, who was the general manager, um, left at some point and ran Zenya's North American operation, opening their stores, and then came back to New Orleans and is he's the principal, I believe he's the president and CEO of Torino Leather. Um, Kim Herron, who had come from, I believe, North Carolina, who was just one of the nicest guys, uh, left and went to Alexander Julian, then to, I think, Hugo Boss. I believe he ended up at Xenia, and he designed their casual lines. He started at Rubenstein Brothers. And there's story after story after story of people who came in and out of that store.
What do you see as the key value that, or key values that people were getting from that? Why did people come through here and then go on to other places?
I, I think I didn't realize it as much at the time, but it was the thinking and the vision here, the trend setting, were so ahead of the curve um, that I don't think we realized quite how special it was when we were in the middle of it. The training, the sales meetings. I used to love sitting in the sales meetings. I used to take notes. I learned so much. I tell people who feel like listening that I learned more about how to do a closing argument at trial from David Rubenstein that I learned in my entire time going to law school. And I worked for some very talented trial attorneys, but David was able to show you how to build a sale and have it make sense, and how to talk to people, except if you weren't trained in the suits. But it was a standard. You had to live up to their standards. And I think that's probably what it did. It set the bar a little bit higher. You wanted to know a little bit more. You wanted to be able to um, hold your head up a little higher. I know
Did it
that sounds
change?
funny.
Well, did it change the way you saw yourself, who you might be? It sounds like you're.
Well, you always, I think when you're young and you're in undergrad, grad school, um, you have an idea of where you want your life to go. And you want to emulate what is successful. And because of the people I met coming in and out of that store, you learned a lot about people. Um, there were some very powerful, very important, very successful people that would come in that store. Some treated the sales staff so well that you always smiled when they came in. Others, not so much. And you you realize, now of course you probably knew at some level anyway, that some of the people, um, because they were somewhat of a local celebrity, behave one way on the air, and then you learn that they behave another way off the air. And and it's it's like what we, I don't know, if when you go out with friends to have dinner somewhere, and there's always that one party that wants to be rude to the waiter, and you go, you do know they're touching our food, right? And but it spoke volumes about them, and it also gave you examples of who you wanted to be and who you didn't want to be. I think you mentioned you have another person coming right after me to interview. I met him for the first time at Rubenstein Brothers. Couldn't have been nicer. Met him 20 years later when I was practicing law, and reminded him of the first time I met him at Rubenstein Brothers. He didn't remember, but I remembered at the time he was donning a mustache, and he knew I was telling the truth. I, I tried cases against lawyers, and I, I tried cases against lawyers I helped and sold suits to. And I would tell the juries that. I would tell them
Sorry.
what a nice man this man was. I said, when I was in college, I sold him a suit. I said, I don't know if he remembers, but I do, because he treated me nicely. I said, he, he's on the wrong side of this case, but he is a nice man. That always made it a little more difficult for them to say anything bad about me in closing argument, because that's a tack that many people will take. Um, of course, when
I feel that all people who, before they are given their adult card, should have to either go into the military, go into the Peace Corps, the local corps,
right,
or do a service job.
absolutely,
Wait tables, work at a retail store, because there, I agree with you. There's nothing that shows a person's character that when they don't think you are have any power to offer them, and you
hmm
see how they
they
behave in
behave.
that situation. And then later, when maybe your power is more equal, you never forget, good or bad, you never forget when you're in that position what it feels like to be treated like you are not
I
worthy of
never,
respect, or that you are worthy of respect.
I, I, I never call the names of the people who were rude, but I've never forgotten them either, um, because there were. It, Sometimes it wasn't so much rude; it was just being dismissive. And everyone can have a bad day, but when the same person has a bad day every time they come in your store, it it's a little difficult. Um, we would talk. I had forgotten about Brian Francher, who had worked as I believe he was one of the accessory buyers for the store and a salesperson, and he went on to establish a very successful real estate practice here in town. And it's in the beat goes on with so many people who had worked here. Um, it was just very. I have fond memories of this. It.
Do you remember, so you talked about Mr. David and Mr. Andre, you talked
Mm,
about Kenny and Mark as little boys in the store. Um, do you remember um, were there other people who you worked with who proved to be really supportive, helped you understand how to sell, or why this mattered?
well, I mentioned Tom Garner. Tom, at the time in undergrad, I was married, and we only had one vehicle, and my wife at the time didn't have to be, she worked in retail as well, but didn't have to be at work till noon. And I would work every Saturday open to close. And so Tom would pick me up every Saturday and give me a ride to work. And I guess he'd get me around 8 o'clock. I was in much earlier than I needed to be. But he always took time out to talk to me, um, and and almost treat me as an equal, even though I wasn't an equal at the time. He was one of the he was really one of the better um, store managers that we had, and it was nice because later, when I started practicing law, I was able to come in and he would he would sell me clothes. And and I remember the first time I ordered a special ordered three Xenia suits, and it was I finally thought, man, I have arrived. I wish I could still fit in those Xenia suits, but um, but I learned a lot from him. There was an assistant manager at the store named Donald Johnson, who was one of the nicest men. And he always had time to talk to you. And if you did something that was a little um, beneath their standards, he was a calming effect in talking to you about how, Roland, I think you ought to try to approach it this way or that way. Uh, I think at the at the height out there at the plaza, we had to have an active sales force in the neighborhood of 20 salespeople on the floor. I mean, people would come and go over time, but it was a big group, and it was there were a lot of personalities, and you can imagine when you're only working on commission, how aggressive things can get. Uh, I remember my number was 217, and Tom used to leave it open because when I started law school, they really didn't want us working. But frequently, I had a car that wouldn't work, and it was a funny thing, landlords expected rent every month.
Every month.
Every month. So I, um, I would try to adhere to the law school's restrictions of not working, but I couldn't. And Tom would just let me come in and I would sell. And it was great for me, and it kept my head above water. Um,
Were you ever tempted? You were a young man,
mhm.
so were you ever tempted to move over to All American Jeans?
No, it I had, you know, that old adage where it says dress for the job you want, not for the job you have. I always wanted to be a trial attorney, and I just thought that working at Rubenstein Brothers, learning about clothing, and when you were a full-time employee, you got a little bit of a clothing discount. And so I was able to upgrade my clothes. And I just enjoyed working there. Plus, I think overall I probably made a lot better money um, because the commission was, it was all on me. If I couldn't perform, I would be the one going hungry. Um, it was great. I can tell you that after after I graduated and started practicing law, I remember this story. So I was buying a pair of pants in the Madison shop, and I was a judge now, and I was trying them on, and I'm standing in the mirror, kind of looking, and all of a sudden I feel all the salespeople are kind of gathering around. I said, what's going on? It was odd. There was a guy buying a shirt. He was buying a Xenia dress shirt. And he was trying it on, and we were both kind of in the mirror together. And I look up and I go, you're a movie star. And he goes, hi, Alec Baldwin. And I said, hey, I'm Roland Belsome. And one of the salespeople, and I can't remember if it was Mark Rodriguez or Tom Garner. I don't remember if Tom had left or not yet. And they go, this is Judge Belsome. He used to be a salesperson with us years ago. And he looked at me and goes, you're a real judge? And I go, yeah, and you're a real movie star. And he goes, you sold clothes here? And this was a short time after Glengarry Glen Ross had come out. And he had that, I think he was only on film for maybe 7 minutes, and had that speech about sales. And I looked at him, I said, you know, it takes balls to be a salesman. He put his hands down on the table and went straight into character and said, that's brass balls. And then one of the other salesmen started quoting his lines back to him. The guy couldn't have been nicer, because Lord knows people tell him that all the time. But it was just one of those moments. It was one of those moments.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
That's
I
a
mean,
great
that was
story.
just a,
I have not heard that one before.
I-
That's a wonderful
well,
story.
it was, who else was there? It was Rodrigue. There were a couple other guys. And the names are escaping me at the moment. But it was, it was just a great time. But that was really symbolized the story. You never knew who you were going to be talking to, who you were going to run into, and whether you were helping someone buy their fursuit. I remember one couple when I was working at the plaza. The man had retired. I don't remember what he did. He could have been like a boilermaker or a carpenter, but he and his wife were going on a cruise, and she was determined for him to have outfits for the whole time. So it ended up being a very big sale. I mean, there were cashmere coats, there were this, it was, and I mean, really decked out. And the man came back to me um, after the trip and thanked me. And he said, man, he said, all the people on the boat would wait for us to come out for dinner every day because I'd have a new outfit on there.
That's great.
And it was, you could tell it really made their trip. Or, you know, local celebrities, I know a lot of people um, back at that time were the Lamarck brothers. Now, Ronnie Lamarck never shopped at the plaza, but his brothers Timmy and Tommy did. And they were in there like clockwork every Friday evening and or on a Saturday, but it was more Friday evenings. And on Saturdays, their daddy would come in, old man Mr. Lamarck, who couldn't have been a nicer guy. And but it was just you know, it was just a feel for the whole area.
So these are some incredible stories about Rubenstein's through the years, and of course, this is in part in honor of Rubenstein's 100th anniversary. So let me just ask the question. It's been 100 amazing years. Is it important that Rubenstein's is here for another 50 or 100 years? And if so, why? What is it to New Orleans? What is it that Rubenstein's means in the city?
You know, that's a great question, because when you look back, and now today, because of social media, people post old videos and photographs of shopping down Canal Street and how things used to be. And you look on Canal Street now, and many of the merchants, particularly the clothing merchants, are no longer, or I guess they would call them dry goods merchants, are no longer in business here. But Rubenstein Brothers continue, or I got to stop saying Rubenstein Brothers
It's okay.
because I, do you know when I pay my accountant, this was the first account I've ever had, and I still have it. I still write Rubenstein Brothers when I pay my bill. But they're one of the few families and businesses that have continued to to move forward in with the times. Um, Others didn't for probably a multitude of reasons. But with Morris and Elkin, I didn't know Sam. I'm not sure that he was alive when I started. I don't recall meeting him. But if you think back, Morris and Elkin starting this with just a little corner of this store on Canal and St. Charles for ties and shirts. And Dora and Gertrude coming in and learning the tie business. And Elkin pushing as hard as he could, and Morris. Um, David will have to tell you the story about how when other people were having a real difficult time paying their bills, that they were they were doing everything they could to make sure rent was paid. And so when their landlord ultimately was going to sell the building, I believe he gave Morris and Elkin first shot at buying. There's a great deal more to that story, and David told me one day, and it's fascinating. And if you haven't heard it, you need to get it on tape. But I look at it as David and Andre were true innovators, and they sort of led the way. There are some other clothing outlets in town that, to me, modeled their businesses after Rubenstein Brothers. And they're extremely successful and they're great people, but my loyalty was to come here. Um, I think it's important not only for the business track in New Orleans, but just for New Orleans history in general. The corner of St. Charles and Canal Street wouldn't be the same without having Rubenstein Brothers here. And I'll tell you, I have a younger brother who left New Orleans and uh, went out to California and has established a very successful law practice out there for the last, I guess, 40 years. And he only buys his clothes from Rubenstein Brothers. He comes back here to buy. When I was working at the plaza, we had customers that came in from Alabama, Florida at the time, um, other parts of Louisiana. They would only buy at Rubenstein Brothers. And I think it was more than just the 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 brands that they carried. They knew they were going to have quality brands. There are other stores that carry quality merchandise, but I think it was the quality of the service, and you felt like you were part of the family when you came in the store. You felt special. And I think having this as an ongoing interest, and now I can see we're into I guess, the third generation with Kenny, Allison, um, working here, and I really give Kenny too hard of a time. And
As his sister, I can
yeah,
say, there's no such thing.
it's just it's just I can't say, and we haven't even talked about how the the effort and the leadership that Andre has put into the downtown development district, um, and other civic organizations that have really, I think that's the other thing that had them heads and shoulders apart from other people, because it it wasn't that they were engaged in politics. It was they were engaged in the community, and they made a difference, and they put their money where their mouth was, and they have always been a part of this community. One quick story I remember about Andre. Okay, this is after the fact. I wasn't here. I think I was in, I think I was either in law school or had just graduated. No, I was practicing law. And, David and Andre will always step out onto the sidewalk and greet people. And for folks who haven't been through here, they really need to come in and visit. But at some point in time, there was a shoplifter coming down the street, running down the street. And I think, in my recollection, Andre was in his 60s, because at the time, my perception was he was old. Not seasoned, not vintage, old. And I don't know if a security guard or a police officer was chasing this guy. And Andre did an open field tackle on the street.
I have not heard that.
It is. And you're going to have to ask him exactly when it happened. But I do remember Andre it was, you know, I would not say he was long in the tooth, but he was damn near it. So, but anyhow.
I'm not putting this on social media, but not for nothing. I think you would definitely classify him as old now, and the man is in crazy good shape. I don't. He
Remarkable.
Can do like he the Wii Fit thing. There's one of the things you can do on that is jackknifes.
Mm-hmm.
Do it competitively against the electronic instructor. He beats the electronic instructor.
So I guess it was maybe 2 years ago. I think Andre's day off was Thursdays. Now we're talking about
Still
a guy,
is.
we're talking about a guy who is now 84, 86, 85. And he lives right next door to my mom on the lakefront. Okay, my mom's in the next condo building on the lake. And he was telling me, so I know he was 82, 83 at the time. He goes, oh yeah, I've been, with these bike lanes, I've been riding my bike in to work. I said, Andre, you're gonna get killed. Don't do that. Oh no, Rowan, it's really fine. You come right up Marconi and then up Orleans and then I said, Andre, people do not see you. And he would ride his bike in on his day off just to check on things at the store and then ride back home. But thank goodness, someone shared with me at a later date that he no longer tries to do that. I was worried. But I thought, just in general, it's remarkable. I think just looking at David and Andre, the only changes I've seen in them, and this is, we're almost 50 years now, I've known them in some capacity. The graying of their hair, and maybe walking just a little bit slower. Andre is the same personality I've always remembered, quiet. Andre might have kicked me out of the suits, but he wouldn't have done it the way David did. Andre was always soft-spoken. I mean, firm, but soft-spoken. And David was always the bundle of energy, kind of bouncing. And my memory was both of them, they would come together in a car together out to the plaza every Saturday. And if they were there during the week for some reason, I always thought there was a problem. Um, I had worked with the first manager I worked with there was a fellow named Roger Johns. And he was a very flamboyant manager and loved the opera. And on Saturdays, I would always be there open to close. That's what I did. I'd work 12, 13 hours on a Saturday, depending how much, if we had to stay late to fold and clean the store up, depending how hectic the Saturday was. Um, but on Saturday mornings, uh, Mr. Johns would come in to the mall and would be singing opera at the top of his lungs. And you're looking around thinking somebody turned a stereo on or something. He was a character. Very nice man. I learned a fair amount with sales um, from him, more about fabrics and just learning a little bit here and there. I also learned that I would never dye my hair because sometimes his hair was green, sometimes orange red. But he was a great guy. There were just so many characters. There was a buyer who would come out there almost weekly named Bill Church, who was a very nice man. And they would set up the windows because we had sales windows in the plaza, and of course they had the windows on Canal, and then at a later time with Lakeside, the Lakeside store. And it was you always picked up something. You always learned if you would listen. If you, they would always drop something to you. Not, you know, not in a forceful fashion, but just if you were paying attention, they would help you.
I have a couple more questions, but I do want to respect your time. But one
You
thing,
do whatever you want.
it's okay if you don't remember, but I just want to see. Do you remember I can't remember what they call it, the 7 fundamentals of sales or the 7 questions you have to answer? It's okay
Oh
if you
God,
don't.
no. Now you're going to make me go
No,
back and
no,
study.
no, I just wondered.
7 fundamentals of sales. No.
Don't worry about it. It's totally fine.
No,
I wouldn't
no.
expect you to, but
Now I've got
I just wondered.
I need a refresher course.
Um,
Well, just like this morning, I was sitting in the sales meeting. It felt good. It was great being back in it. Um,
it's something like, what do you, I don't know them because I never got trained, but um, what are they looking for? What do they want to look like? Anyway, I don't remember, but, and the other question I have, you were there, if you're there from 79 through 84, that's a time,
76.
sorry, 76 through 84, even more so, that's a time of great social change in New Orleans. Did you see any of that reflected inside the store? Any of that come in any way?
So you're going to have to ask um, David and Andre about this. And by the way, I told you I'm 65 now. I did not start calling them David and Andre till about 2 years ago because it was always Mr. David, Mr. Andre. We always had uh, a diverse sales force on the floor and in the plaza and here at the downtown store. But it was my understanding, and I'm uncertain where I learned this from, but that Rubinstein Brothers may have been the first store downtown that African Americans were permitted to try clothes on in the store. Prior to that, and that obviously predated the time I was here. That happened in the 60s or maybe earlier. Um, but we always had, because our clientele was very diverse.
Yeah.
We had a very diverse, we had a lot of pro athletes that came in the store. I remember one fella, I think he played ball for the Rams, but he was a local guy. I think his name was Jackie Wallace. And he came in there one day
I'm listening.
and they had um, they called the tailor out because he had been in New York and purchased a Pierre Cardin suit for his 5-year-old son, who may have just been 5. And the tailor came out and fit his boy, and and this young man looked so sharp in his double-breasted Pierre Cardin. But it was Mr. Wallace had been a long time, customer of the store, and it was that little extra added service
Yeah.
that was always available. Um, we had some of our salespeople, Sam Tate, Earl Durrell. Um, they had huge books of business that were coming in and out of the store, and that's where I ended up meeting a lot of not just elected officials, newly minted attorneys. Um, I blew a sale one time as this lawyer. It's what you. It's funny the things you remember. It was a young lawyer. He's probably 5 years older than me, so he's probably 20, 25 to 27 at the time. He's working at a big downtown firm. He had gone to Yale. He was a real highfalutin guy, and he was making some money. And I had him for 3 suits. In the third suit, he loved it. He loved the suit, and it was kind of a pricey suit. And I made the mistake. He goes, "What color would you call this?" I said, "Oh, I think that's lavender." And the minute I said it, his face dropped. He goes, "I can't wear this to work." And so I blew the sale. And it's so funny. I became very good friends with the man as the years went on. And when I got out of law school, I would talk to him from time to time about cases and such. And he always brings up, he goes, "You almost sold me a lavender suit." It's
You're like, it would have been a great
it's
suit.
it's funny what people remember.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just so many faces that just that you would see week in and week out, and then it just sort of it fades over time. But I think if you probably look at the consistent customers and client base of this store, I think it's people who've been coming here since they were very young. The 70s were great because people dressed up so much. And if they couldn't get a new suit every week, they'd come in and they'd buy a new shirt and tie, or a silk shirt, or there was a lot of different options. And I think the reason the store continues to move forward is because David and Andre and Kenny see see what's going on. Even though the world has gotten a little more casual, they've been able to adapt to that and put their own special brand on it. But anyhow, I wish them the best with their 100th anniversary, and I hope I'm around for many more of them.
I so appreciate that, and I so appreciate your time and your stories. I look forward to catching up with you about some of the